The Collective Whisper Podcast with Simon Kane. Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. Today I'd like to welcome Pauline Scanlon, who is with us here today. Pauline Scanlon is a vocalist and songwriter who galvanized the Irish music scene with the stunning debut album Red Colour Sun, produced by John Reynolds over 10 years ago. Scanlon is capable of making the oldest ballads sound immediate and fresh while granting newer material a timeless resonance. As featured vocalist with the Sharon Shannon Band for 3 years, as a solo artist, and as a member of vocal duo LUMIERE, Scanlon has entranced audiences the world over with a distinctly delicate intensity. Pauline Scanlon also brought her unmistakable vocal style to her second Compass release, Push, produced by former Lúnasa guitarist Donogh Hennessy and recorded at the Compass soundstage in Nashville. As a vocalist, Pauline has performed and recorded with a wide range of artists including Damien Dempsey, Sinead O'Connor, Eleanor Shanley, Karen Casey, Andrea Corr, John Spillane and Seamus Begley. Pauline has been involved with a wide range of collaborative singing projects including the Irish Sea Sessions, A Storm Cree and Homeward Bound, all projects involving the leading exponents of Irish song. Pauline has just begun to record her third solo album this year. She is reunited with her longtime collaborator and producer John Reynolds on what promises to be an emotionally charged album of songs, both traditional and otherwise. Welcome to the show, Pauline.
Thanks a million. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You're welcome, Pauline. So, Pauline, you're in Headford right now.
I'm in Headford, County Galway. Well, I'm actually in County Mayo. I'm right about 10 foot into Mayo, but I don't broadcast that fact. I kind of try and keep that to myself.
Yeah, because that's the thing of like, when you're in Headford and you're down, you know, sometimes with Cong and Shrewell and all these places, you're stepping over the boundaries of both of them, aren't you?
You're stepping into the Badlands either way. And coming from Kerry, from West Kerry, it's a funny thing for me because I come from very far West Kerry on the Dingle Peninsula, so it's just one road east and one road west. So this whole kind of warren of roads and networks and county bounds is a kind of a new experience for me.
And it's funny, but like obviously down around Headford, Shrewell, it's beautiful down there, and you're, you know, as you said, once you're heading towards Cong and, you know, Mona, it's just beautiful down there, isn't it?
Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely. And my husband and I just converted an old transit van to camper. And so we had our maiden voyage in it this week, and we went far west Connemara, out as far as Lichermullen, and then back around to Clifton and back in. And so there's like really amazing places right close by you for exploration. So it's lovely. My husband is from Belfast and I'm from Dingle. So we had been doing a big drive between our two families, so it's nice to be Lorna na Porca, as you could say now.
Lorna na Porca, that's really cool. You know, it's funny about Galway because a lot of Galway is very flat. You know, it's very flat country, but then as you're heading towards Mayo and obviously out towards Connemara, there's some mountains and beautiful mountains out there. So people can be misled a little bit, and you kind of have to say to them, no, you need to go out further. Go out further.
Yeah, keep going. You'll find it. Yeah. Keep going.
Because sometimes I remember people saying to me, it's not very hilly or mountainy around here. And I'd say, no, you have to go out further, like out along the coast or go towards Mayo and places, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
That road from Galway to Tuam, the N17, the famous N17, it's very flat, you know, and you'd be misled.
Yeah.
You'd be misled. So you were born in Dingle, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I was actually born in the Rotunda in Dublin, but both my parents are from West Kerry and all my grandparents, bar one. I've one from Limerick. So they brought me back to West Kerry when I was a couple of months old. So that's where all belonging to me are.
Yeah. And you know, like everybody, well, I assume a lot of people in Ireland and abroad have been to Dingle, and you know, for all its charm and everything, and fungi and the whole lot. But What was it like for you growing up in Dingle? Was it a very quiet place when you were younger growing up, or was it always full of tourists?
Well, it has changed, and the tourism, I think, has changed quite a lot. When I grew up, so I was born in 1979, and so I grew up in Dingle in the 80s, really, as a child. And there was always visitors. I suppose it is kind of evolved to tourism as a kind of a business, I guess, more now. But growing up, it was the kind of place that the world came to us. So there was lots of visitors, and it was visitors that were looking for scenery, definitely the outdoors, but definitely language and culture played a huge part in it. And yeah, it was harder to get to that time. Like if you were to fly into Dublin, we'll say, and drive down to Dingle, it probably took 8 hours because you had to stop in every hole in the hedge on the way and all the way down through. So it was very Irgulta and very out of the way, very hard to get to. So it meant that the people that did come really had reasons and that kind of thing. And West Kerry is a place that has a lot of kind of interesting cultural practices and events, like the Ran and just different things and old pubs and that kind of thing, and obviously traditional music and language and that kind of thing. So you had a very kind of a cultured visitor, I suppose. But that has kind of evolved quite a bit more, and now we do definitely get more mass tourism, which has its drawbacks. I question the sustainability of a lot of it. But it also means that during all of the recessions and that, we definitely suffered less from immigration. There was always more jobs, but we do have fishing and farming as industries as well. So, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. I personally find the mass tourism difficult to live beside, just on very practical levels. Some of the capitalist elements of it don't sit all that well with me, but I also see the benefits in terms of people making a living. How the money and how the opportunity is distributed is,
Yeah, that's the thing. And I suppose that has really been brought to the forefront with the whole disappearance of Fungi, and because people kind of go, oh, well, Fungi himself was an industry, and once he disappeared, it meant those, tour guides and fishermen who were tour guides and bringing people out in boats, it kind of killed a bit of their livelihood or their income. But as you said there, that capitalism can creep into people without them even knowing it, because what can happen is people can say, oh, I'd never do that. But then once they can make a good living, it's kind of hard to escape it, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But basically, that's it in a nutshell. It is hard to escape it. And look, I would never, question anybody wanting to earn a crust or make a living. And I mean, even Fungi, I never made any money off Fungi myself personally. But he was an awful lot more like where my house is, my home place where my father lives now, is up past the lighthouse in Dingle. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's right up on the top of
yes.
a cliff, kind of. And so from our patio in the morning, we'd be like, the way sound travels over water, like I'd frequently wake up and I could hear him splashing and hitting the water. And my grandmother's house was right on the walk out to the little beach out to Slodine. So we were swimming with him and kind of interacting with Fungi from a very young age. And he was there 38 years and I'm 42. So I don't really remember a time when he wasn't there.
Wow.
So he was almost like a communal pet as much as he was an industry for some people. And I mean, lots of people come to Dingle and they never go and see Fungi as well. Like, sometimes I think the economic role that he has played is overplayed. But it was a remarkable thing. And I'd go out to see him a couple of times a year, all my life on boats, or pals have ribs and punts and all sorts of things. And no matter how many times you'd see him, it was every time was magic like the first time. He was just a really beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous creature. And we were very lucky to have him.
Yeah. And, it's funny there, but just, when you said you never made any money off him, if he ever comes back, you can record a duet with him or an album.
Yeah.
The beautiful sounds of Pauline Scanlon and Fungi. Maybe he'll have lots to sing about.
I'm sure it has been attempted. There have been some really interesting people have come to Dingle to interact with Fungi, and I think many things have been attempted. So it wouldn't surprise me if I wasn't the first.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised, because like you see it in other parts of the world, where dolphin sounds or whale sounds. So I'm sure people have said, well, hold on, I could record all of those sounds and make an album.
I'm sure. Fungi in Irish. I'm sure it's probably
Fungi. Maybe he went looking to get some copyright claim or to get his money back. Maybe that's where he's gone now.
And more power to him if he has.
And more power, yeah. So tell us, like, obviously growing up in Dingle, before, I know you probably were into music from a very early age, but did you have other things you were into, other hobbies or sport or kind of other crafts or things you liked?
Sport, I suppose. I come from a big GA family. So sport, football and that kind of thing when I was younger. But not really. I took not to any great, I mean, I played sports in school and played a bit of football and a bit of basketball and that kind of thing. But not really, no. Like I started singing for money, when I was about 15, and up until that point, I went to boarding school and then I was in school. So outside of kind of school hobbies and that kind of thing, I didn't really. It was kind of music from a really early age, really.
So your parents are from Dingle, so that means the Irish language was always in your family.
Yeah, more on my dad's side, and then we didn't speak Irish at home in the house to each other because my mother didn't really have Irish. My dad is lovely Irish, and then his side of the family would have had plenty Irish, but all my schooling was in Irish, and it's always kind of around you. So I think even people who are from Dingle, there's kind of so the Gaeltacht really, in terms of the most people who speak Irish, are west of Dingle. So Dingle being kind of the frontier or the entry point into the Gaeltacht. So a lot of people from Dingle wouldn't necessarily have the same level of Irish as somebody from Dunquin. That's just the reality of it. But everybody would have a very reasonable level of Irish and great understanding of it. But I went to Cloistida, which is an all Irish language boarding school, and I suppose I've kind of had occasion through my work and stuff to use it more than other people. But my Irish is, Resum Toma, it's good Irish, but I'm not like other people have the absolute, it's their first language. It's not mine.
And it's interesting. I a few podcasts ago, I had a Nigerian girl on, Ola Majikadumi, and she is a fluent Irish speaker. And it's amazing the work she's doing for the Irish language. And, so it's really, for me, when I brought her on, I thought this is a nice twist, because you're sometimes Irish people don't value the language enough. But when immigrants come into the country, sometimes they grow up and they're involved in the language and they embrace it so much more, and I think it's one of those things I always look back on. I don't speak Irish at all, and I always look back on and I always say, it's partly my own fault, but it was with the school system. And I think if you lived in the right areas, it was just a natural thing. But if you lived in the non-Gaeltacht areas, you could only rely on school, and sometimes that wasn't enough.
Yeah, I mean, they say, don't they, like the total immersion is kind of the way to go to learn Irish. But I mean, a lot of the Irish language, and I mean, I guess the education of the entire country outside of Gaeltacht areas in terms of the Irish language falls at the door of the Department of Education. And I kind of argue that's kind of agreeing with you that that's not enough. And there's a lot of kind of, I suppose people have misgivings about how it was taught, but I don't particularly remember enjoying maths or geography either. But I probably, like it's but I think it's improving. And I think younger people definitely, like, Irish is a quite kind of a loaded thing. I think there's a lot of shame attached to it, and people are ashamed at the level of Irish that they have. Even I am, and I have relatively good Irish, but that it's not good enough, and then they're embarrassed and afraid to speak it. And then you have people who are encouraging, and people who I think largely unintentionally can be very discouraging. If you have people correcting you and that kind of thing, about grammar and stuff, it would be considered rude in English, but yet people still think it's okay to do it in Irish.
Yeah, and even me living in Spain here, people say to you, "Oh, you're from Ireland, and do you speak Irish?" And I'm like, okay, so you have to go into the speech about English colonialism, and and it's like, I'm so sick of it now, because you're kind of like, in your head, you're trying to find the reasons you don't speak Irish, and then you're thinking it's my own fault, I was just lazy, or you're trying to find reasons why you don't do it. And to be honest, I don't know myself. Is it my fault? Is it the government's fault? I don't know, but I just know that, it's one of these things that, as you said, so many Irish people have that shame of not being able to speak their own language. And when you're in the country and you say it to somebody else, you have a laugh. But when you're in another country you kind of feel more ashamed because people are like, you can't speak your own language. It's kind of weird, you know?
Yeah, no, it is definitely weird, and it's complex.
Yes.
It's very complex and complicated, and we do have colonialism to thank for that, amongst other things.
Here's a question. Obviously, because you worked with John Spillane in the last few months or the last year on his latest album, when you work with John, because John loves the Oscailga, do you speak with John in Irish when you're working together, or do you speak in English?
Yeah, a lot of Irish and a lot of English, both. Yeah, and yeah, we do speak a lot of Irish together, actually, John and I. So yeah, both. And John is a communicator, you know. So sometimes you just kind of fall in and out of. But I'd have that with a lot of people, you know. I'd have that with a lot of people in my life where I'd speak both.
Brilliant, yeah. Because I was going to say, obviously, you know, because your singing style goes across different specters, and you know, you're sometimes more traditional, sometimes more ambient. So I'm sure some characters you work with, they're fluent Irish speakers and traditional singers and everything. So you probably have that where you could be in the studio one day with an artist or a singer and they're speaking fluent Irish, and the next day you're with somebody else, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a very fluid thing, and I personally find that kind of refreshing, and even musically in those things, just to be a bit fluid and a bit not boxed into any one thing. I think that's just.
So tell us about your family, like brothers and sisters. How many?
I have one younger brother, Brian. He's 2 years younger than me. We're great old mates. And then obviously two parents. My mother passed away and my father lives down in Dingle. Yeah.
And, you know, right now, obviously with everything that happened with COVID, you know, has it been a difficult time seeing family and going back and over?
Yeah, it has. Like, I mean, because Eamon and I have a little girl, a daughter, Kitty. Because we don't have family around us here, even the meeting your relative for a walk, or that, none of that is an option for us. I'm sure you feel the same. You probably don't have too much family around you over there either.
I haven't been home since the last time I was home was February of 2020, and I was home on my own, and my wife and kids haven't been back to Ireland since I think August of 2019. So time's gone by very fast now, you know?
It is, isn't it? And like there's stuff, I think, for grandparents, you know. I just see my dad, whose reason for living is my daughter Kitty. They are absolutely best friends and they absolutely love each other so much. And he's down on the ground rolling around with her and pulling and dragging and all that crack. And I know how much he feels he's missed out. And it's funny, like, as the months go on, and like he was here for Christmas, all right, but we'd be very tight and we'd see a lot of each other like ordinarily. I can see him getting a bit down in the mouth about it. He's just a bit down, but hopefully now he's had a vaccine, and my husband and Eamon and I have had a vaccine as well. So you know, that looks like it might be on the cards sooner rather than later, which is really great. And we're dying for a babysitter. And I doubt.
How old is Kitty?
She's 4. She'll be 5 in November. Yeah.
Has she stepped into the realm of singing yet? Like, is she humming a few tunes?
She is, you know, and she can sing in tune beautifully, like, and she does. And I mean, she loves, weirdly, I mean, not weirdly at all, I totally understand it, but she loves Dolly Parton. She's really into Dolly Parton. Yeah, and Billie Eilish as well at the moment. But I don't want to kind of push her, you know. I like, the worst thing would be to make it seem like a chore in any way or something that I was pushing on her. So we'll see how it, because it's a lonely old road sometimes, the music, you know yourself.
Yeah, like the thing about it is, you know, people are, you know, I saw a funny meme yesterday, and it was somebody saying, "Oh, you're still doing the music,"
Yeah.
you know, and
I know, and you want it.
It's like, who was saying it to me lately? I can't remember. There was somebody was saying, you know, when you're doing it and you're successful, I mean, it's brilliant. But when you have bad moments or nothing's happening, people are kind of looking like, and you wouldn't get another job, but they wouldn't say it in that direct way. They kind of
their
say,
face says
yeah,
it
their face says it. So I think for parents who are musicians, they're kind of looking at their kids going, geez, I don't know, do I want that life for them? Or is it like, I'd love them to sing, but get paid first.
Sing and get paid for it, absolutely. And you'd want them to take the joy in it as well before you ever kind of think. And I just think that because it's my job, and when I say I'm going out to work, you know, that's what it is. So you'd want to, like, you know, that if she decided to take to it, that she would just take real joy and enjoyment from it, and that would be the first thing. Whatever about doing anything with it after that, I think the joy and the enjoyment of it is something that, I guess, if you're a musician for a long time, you don't always get. I mean, you do definitely get it, but there are, there's a lot of graft in it too. So
when you, with Tony Small, you started singing when you were, well, you started kind of singing, performing when you were 13 or 14. So did you, besides the singing, like in your local neighborhood there, you were mentioning babysitter, did you have other jobs, or did you have other ways of making money besides music?
I did, yeah, up until I was about 20, I suppose 19 or 20. I did a bit of waitressing and bar work, worked in a clothes shop, and then I went traveling for a while. I was out in Australia, and I wasn't doing a whole pile of singing there. I was mainly kind of waitressing and arsing around, really. So I always had that. And then when I was 19 or 20, I was working in the Crane Bar in Galway, and that was the last job that I had. Maybe 20, about 20 or something like that. And then I just started playing music. I joined Sharon Shannon's touring band, and haven't really done anything else. I mean, when I say I haven't done anything else.
Yeah. You've done a lot, but you haven't gone down the regular work route, we'll say.
But I've just applied actually to do a degree in NUIG. Hopefully I get my place. I'll be waiting to see, but I just filled out the CAO to go and do something, because I would like to use my brain in other ways.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's funny, my mum is like 73 now, but when my dad died, like maybe 15, 16 years ago, my mum was kind of like a housewife, and then she was like 60 something, or 60, I think. But she decided to go back to university and went to NUIG and was the oldest in the class, and she did really well. So, I mean, I always said to people, you're never too old to do anything.
Isn't that just so inspiring? And did she really enjoy it?
She loved it, and it was, and she it was amazing, because she had times in the class where she'd be getting top marks above 19 and 20 and 25-year-olds, because she was more into it than they were. Do you know what I
mean? Yeah. I mean, there is an element of that, isn't there? That if you're a grown woman and you want to go back and study something, that you'd be pretty sure that's what you wanted to do. It's not like something that you go and, flippantly do.
Yeah, because I think that when we're 18, 19, 20, and even, the next few years, we're never quite sure what we want to do, and we're only figuring it out. And the thing about it is, sometimes you go to university and then it's like, what am I doing here? Or do I really want to do this? You're more interested in the crack and meeting people and,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I dropped out of school when I was 15. I didn't even finish school. So for me, like, I was just still had that kind of almost siege mentality of the school dropout, going, oh God, this isn't for me. And, I mean, people were just laughing at me when I'd say that education is for everyone, but it remains to be seen anyway, because I still haven't crossed the doors of the place, but I hope to.
Yeah. I mean, that's another kind of a skill that's waiting to be discovered, and you'll probably find, that you really take to it, and you'll add another notch to your belt. So I think it's a great thing, So listen, Pauline, let's go back to, let's say, when you were 12, 13 and you met Tony Small. Tell us about that and how that kind of lit the fire for you.
Well, I was always, when I went to school into junior infants when I was 4 years old, the same as everybody else. And there was a nun in there, Sister DeSales. She actually only passed away a couple of weeks ago. And I used to sing, and my dad used to drive me into school every morning, and we'd be singing away in the van and singing this song and singing that song. So I had loads of songs that I just learned from him, nothing particularly cultured or anything like that. They were choral songs, just that everybody had. Grace, just a lovely songs, like. But so she kind of twigged that, and she used to bring me in and around to the older classes, and I used to be, and sometimes she'd put like a girl from 6th class to bring me up to the secondary school, like up to the convent, and I'd go in singing songs for them. And I kind of knew then at that really early age, okay, this is something that I can do. And, and I just always did it. And so I used to be singing around at home, and I was mad for music. Not so much like I'd listen to a lot of music, but mainly the act of singing, the verb of singing, the partaking in the action. So I'd be always singing around the house, and it really drove my family mad, I think, like particularly my brother. He used to be like, shut the fuck up, I used to just never stop, like.
Yeah.
And then and I weirdly, I don't really do that anymore, but anyway, my mother was friends with Tony Small. Tony lived down in Dingle for years and years, and he was coming and going kind of from Dingle since the 70s. And he'd come for a few years and then he'd be gone, and then he'd come back and he'd be gone. And I just always knew him from when I was 7, 8, 9 years of age, and they were friends, and he'd be drinking tea in the house. And then my mother just said to him when I was about 13, 14, maybe, she said, Pauline is mad for singing. Would you teach her a few songs? So I think out of politeness, he said, of course I would, because he was always in and around the house. And he came to the house then, and he started asking the questions. And then he just literally, over the course of, I'd say Tony's probably dead 7 or 8 years now, there wasn't like a week that went by that we wouldn't be in touch. Like, we were very, very tight and very close friends. But particularly from like 14 till I was maybe 30, in that time, and very accelerated in the beginning. He just taught me loads of songs, and he was a songwriter as well. But what really interested me in what Tony taught me was about the old songs and the families of songs, and how they related, and how they traveled over to Appalachia, and how the child ballads in England were related to the Irish language songs here. And just that kind of encyclopedic knowledge of folk song just always interested me, because I find fierce solidarity in old songs, because they're the enduring questions of humanity and human emotion and experience. The reason these songs survive so long in the oral tradition is because they remained relevant to people. And I find fierce solidarity and kind of comfort in that, and interest. And I mean, I'm working on a project at the moment, particularly about women's songs. And I've taken the life of my mother, broke it down into 10 stages, and attached traditional songs to her life, because I feel that even though they are enduring, there's large parts of the female experience that are excluded, because most of the collectors were male. So his story is his story. And so a lot of the songs that were relevant to women's lives would have been deemed not of interest to really. So there's a lot of songs about war. There's a lot of songs about working. There's a lot of songs about immigration, but there's no songs. The only songs for children are lullabies, but there's very little about the female experience that has endured. So I'm kind of reclaiming and digging around for some of that stuff. But that's how Tony set me on the road, was just that kind of.
It's funny actually, because I recently talked to Sean Keane, and he was talking about how his mother influenced his singing and everything. And what's really interesting for me is that what you say there, a lot of those songs were male driven. They were centered on the male character, the male persona. But a lot of the times they were carried on by women.
A lot of the times they were carried on by women, yeah.
Yeah. You had women singing around the fire and singing while they were working. And then, as he said, people used to come to their house and share songs and have different versions. And, it's funny because you hear sometimes people talking about Appalachian songs and the Irish songs and Cajun songs, and the similarities and the familiar themes running through them. But what's really interesting is that you can hear a song that's from Ireland and a melody from America or Canada, and they're very similar. But that used to also happen in Ireland too, because you had songs from Cork and then songs from the north of Ireland and Galway and Dublin with different words and everything in them. So it didn't. Yeah.
And a line from here and a phrase and even a turn of melody. Like I was learning Bodenstown Churchyard during the week there for something about the song about Wolf Tone, written at the Thomas Davis song, and it's got a line in the middle of it that's just like the Grainmore Hair, but they're completely unrelated. And really, once you get to know the melodies, they're quite different. But that one twist in the middle of it, you're like, wow, like. That just kind of blows my mind. I just love. Was that a decision by someone, or was it an evolution? Or I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, and it can take the song somewhere else as well.
Yeah, totally.
Like that one line can change things. So it is really interesting when you look back at the history of Irish song and international Celtic songs. But I do agree that I think probably in Irish folklore and in Irish musical history, the women in Irish in the Irish folklore, they don't get enough praise for carrying the songs on, and for even being an integral part of it, because again, it's just something we're really discovering more in the last 50 years, that everything's based on the male persona, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it is. And then if there is elements of the female experience in it, she's almost always wife of, daughter of, and in some way attached to a male. So that female agency, or Ireland, she's a beautiful woman, or she's held up as the spare van, and it's like unrealistic. It's not really the human, ordinary, everyday experience of women. And I think that's really what I want to and not necessarily ordinary, but the whole range more lahan of experiences that women have, for good and for bad. So that's kind of where and why I'm doing this project, because I'm a raging radical feminist who won't shut up about it ever.
Nowadays, I suppose the whole, just when you mentioned the word feminism is being challenged by women, by men, by everything now, because you have womenism, feminism, equality. So it's good to take things from history to reference them against things that are happening right now.
Absolutely.
Because the women were always strong. It's just that their stories always didn't get told.
Yeah, and women have had to be strong. I mean, there's a report that I've been privy to recently. Today, it's coming out tomorrow, actually, from the Why Not Her collective, and it's an overview of the last 20 years of the charts and the homegrown Irish acts in Ireland, and it is staggering. It's literally the airplay that women have had over the last 20 years, which is the length of time really that I've been out doing what I'm doing, and you're looking at roughly, across the board, we're getting about 10% of that action.
That's crazy, because when you look back at the charts, like on a collective level, in the sense that Irish music hasn't been played that much on Irish radio, even on local radio to this day.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, artists are fighting for local stations to play their music, and even though people think, oh, but it's a local radio, but they're still commercial, and the problem is they have a quota. And unfortunately, whether it be male or female, people aren't being played. But then when you put it between the male and female thing, the male percentage of bands or artists is much higher. Now, I think it's changing, but I don't know how quickly. And when what was the name of that song where all the women got together?
Dreams, Irish Women in Harmony.
The Dreams one, which was a lovely version, really good. And I mean, that kind of highlights it a little bit, but unfortunately, sometimes nowadays something can be viral and then can just go away, can't it?
And then just go away. And like, what impact did that really have? And in terms of what did it generate, and what was the revenue from it? And so whilst you have, in some instances, you have visibility of some women, but you look at what the spins and the plays that they get and what they earn, then there's still a massive disparity there. And, I mean, women are very good at clubbing together and fighting to even the scales, at the very least, tip them a little bit more in our favor, but men are going to have to do it as well. Otherwise, it's not going to change.
No, and now what I think the good thing about the modern man, if that's a funny term, is that I think modern males are kind of realizing the disparity between male and female characters in all walks of life, and they're kind of saying, well, okay, we don't know what to do, but the first thing we have to do is recognize that it was there, and the second thing we have to do is see how we can change it and learn as we go along, because this is the thing, we have to have respect for everybody, creed, color, whatever. And the point is that people have to look at it and say, okay, we don't know what do we do? And then someone said, well, look, okay, nobody knows how to do it or how to change it, but here's steps we can take. And we learn as we go along. You're not going to fix it overnight, but it's good that it's starting to kind of impact men now, I think.
Yeah, and it's great as well that, like, we're having this conversation and people will hear it, and so, like, that is a really proactive thing. Like, that's an extraordinarily proactive thing, because, I think dialogue and hearing how reasonable and how achievable it really actually is, and there'll be a million reasons, like you have the local radio station saying, oh, we're playing what our listeners want to hear, and you're saying you're really dictating what they want to hear, like which comes first, the chicken or the egg, and in many instances, and I think the amount of, for instance, this conversation, like the amount of male voices that you hear on the radio or in the podcast world all the time. It's so, even to give the space over and the platform over and the microphone over so that these issues can be played out and spoken about is a really powerful activism. That is it. That's it working and in motion and allowing for and giving the space over for the conversations and the points to be made. I think that's really, really effective. And
and like for me, I'm only doing this podcast 6 months, and we've had some great female guests on. And for me, when I'm looking for guests, sometimes I find some of the more interesting characters can be the women, because it's not like, they're strong feminists and they're out to prove a point. It's not like that. It's that they're very ambitious, and they're saying, well, okay, we want a piece of the pie now, and their story can be really interesting. So for me, I'm like, it's one thing I always think about. I'm thinking, I never want to have this percentage of, I'm not, it's always about the guest. If the guest is interesting, but for me, why not have more women than men? Why not have more? It doesn't matter. The point is, it's about the guest, but it shouldn't be. I think in television and media, too many times, they say, oh, well, this guy has a bigger following, or he's this, or he's that. And then he gets on the air and it keeps going. It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, it's a perpetual cycle of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is.
I was going to say to you there, actually, that it's funny when you look at the charts as well and look at the radio stations. The one big crime that I think radio stations in general do is that they should play local artists and play, like, let's say, for example, in Galway, they should play Galway artists and then let the people decide. But what's happening is, a lot of them, you have all these programmers on radio stations, whether it be Radio 1, RTE, all these, and they make the decision before the people even hear it. So they say,
yeah, this is exactly it. So how do you know what they want if you're not giving them all the options?
So I think sometimes they hear amazing songs and then they go, yeah, but will the demographic like that? Do you think that'll work?
Yeah, we decide no, so that's it. Yeah.
So, like, it would be great if they said, let's put this music on and see how the people react. And if the people like it, we play it a couple of times a week. If the people like it, then we keep playing it. But unfortunately, they try to appease artists and the people by having these hour or 2 hour long Irish music shows. So they play, for example, 100, 150 hours of chart music, and then they put on a show on a Sunday, and it's great. Those shows are great, don't get me wrong.
But it's niched and it's pigeonholed and it's othered, from everything else.
It's like giving the crumbs. It's like you saying, I want a piece of the apple pie, and they go, well, yeah, we can't give you a full piece, but listen, here's a crumb, and it'll keep everybody happy. And then people, hear a song on, for example, a great radio station now is Lochray Community Radio, Martina Flaherty show there. They play some great music. But there's not enough stations doing that. Only, the non-profit stations are doing it, but the commercial ones are not, and they should be doing it more.
100%. And I really like that idea as well of regionality, that if you have Galway Bay FM or Radio Kerry, that they would really bring it down to that local thing. I mean, that's such a gorgeous thing about Ireland and its regions and its regionalities, how everything has a slightly different flavour. And if you're down in Kerry, it's a specific thing. And up around here, there's such an absolute wealth of amazing songwriters and also the traditional thing. And, and then if you go into the cities, it's kind of there's more urban music and that. And, that regionality is something that should be really celebrated and championed by local stations. But we're a ways off that, I think.
And you could talk about it forever, that's the thing. So,
you could.
So let's go back again a bit. And so when you started playing, so when did you do your first gig?
I died in the Drogheda Beag. I'd say my first paid gig, I was still at school, I was 15 maybe, just in and around third year in school. And Tony Small had asked me in, he'd be playing at the Drogheda Beag in Dingle. And he'd ask me in to come and sing, and I'd just come in and sing a couple of songs. I didn't have enough songs at that point to carry a full gig, but by the time I was 18, I suppose, then I would have had, 3 hours of songs to entertain a crowd in the pub, like at home. So I started doing that then, and I haven't really stopped since. But I really miss that. Like, I haven't been gigging in pubs for a long time now, since I moved to Belfast, really. So about 8 years. And I really miss that for the repertoire. Like, in one way, singing to rooms full of tourists gets really jading, and it can be tough at times. But in another way, your repertoire, you're constantly, just to even keep yourself entertained, you're constantly learning new songs. And I notice myself like a bit rusty in that department since I don't do it.
Yeah. You have to sharpen the axe again. Yes.
Yeah. Especially since COVID now as well, because
of course. Yeah. And so, for you at that time then, like, besides what you were singing and your repertoire, what kind of music was influencing you? Like, were you listening to pop, traditional music? Was it a bit of everything?
Bit of everything. I got really into, like, in and around the 90s, I got really into Massive Attack and Portishead and Tricky and a lot of that kind of thing. And then when I moved to Australia, I was partying a lot and going out a lot and stuff. So I really loved funk and soul and disco. And I love that. I still do to this day. Love nothing more than being up to my ears in sequins. And then also the traditional and the folky stuff along the way. And then as I kind of got a little bit older, I got a little bit more into world music and just kind of listening to different kind of indigenous things. But what I really love myself personally is the kind of crossover point. I mean, I've never made a deliberate kind of attempt to do fusion music or anything like that. I just think that all the music that I've liked and listened to just kind of comes out anyway. I mean, I suppose there is a kind of a trad fusion-y movement and stuff, but I actually don't really, because I know most of the people, because it's such a small scene that play that, I think they're just people who are expressing their influences rather than it being a kind of I'm going to, make this traditional music sound more commercial or whatever. I think it's less deliberate than that.
Yeah, and it's hard because, the thing about music sometimes is the whole labels thing, and, they say, oh, you're a traditional singer. And then, as you said, if you wanted to make music that was kind of like Massive Attack or Tricky, that kind of ambient crossover music, the thing is, there should be no limitations, but sometimes there is, because sometimes the limitation is in the listener, but also sometimes it's in people you work with, or, record labels, this kind of a thing, because they're kind of going, you want to do what? You want to make a black metal album with traditional Irish singing. You can't do it. And you say, but I can do whatever I like,
Yeah, I hear, like, absolutely. And it can be just internal as well, how you struggle with, because there's a certain amount of, like, if you play traditional music and if you stick kind of quite rigidly to that and you're good at that, then there's work for it, there's opportunities and work for that very clearly defined thing. But once you kind of move slightly, people kind of assume that if you move slightly outside of it, that you make it more palatable for people who are not into the kind of pure trad thing. But it's my experience of it is it's the opposite, that the pure trad thing is a niche that has quite a big audience, but the stuff on the fringes of it is less definable. And people who really like trad, not sure if they like that. People who like ambient or more poppy or folky or whatever way, they're not sure that they like the traditional element of it. So that's a kind of a bit of a no man's land. And I think in modern folk movements, which feels a bit like the modern folk movement, that at the moment that's very organic and a lot of it is coming from rough trade and kind of that thing, that almost feels like 60s, 70s kind of folk revival stuff to me, and that has an audience. But I think the other kind of peripheral stuff is still, and it's still kind of a bit no man's land, and I find myself sometimes in that no man's land.
Yeah, and obviously, because your main weapon is your voice, did you ever have conflicts where you kind of felt, because you were listening to Massive Attack and Tori Amos and that kind of stuff, maybe that style, did you ever feel like, I don't know if I want to be this or I want to be that? Did you ever have like a crossroad where you wanted to go one way or the other?
Yeah, definitely. When I was younger, like when I was I went to Cloister on Neighbour below in Cork, which is a music kind of like Dublin School of Rock kind of vibe. And I was in like, I suppose what you'd call indie bands, like, did a bit of that kind of thing. And I liked it, and I still do to an extent. Like I sing with different people, and we've a Leonard Cohen thing here locally going, and I still kind of branch out, and I'm a bit of jack of all trades in that respect. But my love, my what really interests me is kind of the old songs, and that always pulls me back. The material all the time just always pulls me back, and that sense of being rooted in something bigger than yourself.
Yes. And I think as well, what happens is that, as people in general, as we get older, we kind of like to discover more about our past and our parents' past and grandparents. So you can get more drawn into that world of songs and older songs as opposed to because when you listen to songs from the 90s, that was your time. But then as you get older, you're like, I want to hear songs from my grandmother's time. I want to hear songs from my mother's time that I wasn't around for.
Yeah, exactly. And you get that real indication that, not a lot changes for people, really. I mean, socioeconomics and politics and those kind of things have shaped things massively. But in terms of the inner workings of the heart, mind and soul, like that all pretty much ticks along as it does. And we all go through the same shit, like.
Yes, exactly. And I always think, I always remember, when you were younger and you were in the car with your parents and they'd have the cassette deck or whatever, and, in the car, and, you'd be like, oh, country music and Irish country music and these radio stations. And I used to always, when I look back now and I think as we go on in generations, like it's nowadays you'll have grandparents who are listening to heavy rock still in their 70s, and you'll have and listening to techno and everything. So it's funny because people mellow with age, but if you're a fan of one style of music, you'll always be a fan. But I used to think as a child, oh, my parents kind of grew too mellow. They kind of adapt. There's music for 60-year-olds and music for 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
But nowadays that's changing a lot, because you could get into a car with a 60-year-old and hear them playing stuff that you think, oh, this is very modern, or for young people.
Yeah, no, that is really true, actually. And I think like the whole movement in terms of vintage, like even for clothes or, those kinds of things, that people like kind of are drawn to old things and to just, like everybody, everybody does look back an awful lot more. And I know what you mean. And I suppose the accessibility of music as well, before we had to go out and buy the CD or buy the tape or whatever it was. And now it's just playlists and, so people are exposed to more stuff, and it's definitely not, less age specific, for sure.
So let's talk, like, obviously a bit about the whole songwriting process for you, because, obviously when you set about to do your debut album, Red Colour Sun, how did you approach that? Did you say, I'm going to write some songs, or I'm going to, connect with people to write songs? How was the process?
I didn't really do it for Red Colour Sun, and I write songs occasionally collaboratively with people, but I'm just not one of those people that's not my way of communicating what I feel. It's just not like, and I don't feel in any way restricted by it or anything. But yeah, I just don't. It doesn't. I've been working quite a bit of recent years with a collective called Pharaoh, and it's Tola Custy and Alan Doherty, and we write stuff together, and I have a hand in that. But I don't really ever sit down and go, this is on my mind and now I have to put pen to paper and write and do it that way. I just don't. I just always reach back into the vault of old songs and say it that way. It's just something I've always done, and I find it to be that solidarity of expression to be far more potent for me personally than whatever I have to say about how I feel.
Yes.
And also I think that as somebody who's, I don't know how to word this now without sounding like an asshole, but as somebody who is a vocalist, like the sound of my voice and the texture of my voice and the way I use it and that kind of thing is where most of the expression is for me, is the act of singing, more so than the decisions before it, or the writing of a song or whatever. It's the moment, the time, in that 3.5, 4, sometimes, let's face it, 7 or 8 minutes. Yeah.
But I think you're right in that sense, because sometimes they're like, the songwriting and singing they work together in tandem. But sometimes you can have the best songs written by somebody else and sang by somebody else.
Yeah.
So you a lot of the time what you have is, if somebody does sing their own song, maybe their voice isn't the most amazing voice, but because the song is so strong,
Yeah,
it carries their voice.
Yeah, totally.
And on the other hand, then you have a situation where, the person who doesn't write the song but sings it can do a far greater job, because they come at it from a different angle, and they obviously have a better instrument, their voice, than the other person maybe.
And you look at some people who have that whole kind of package in one. If you look at people like Sinead O'Connor, she writes incredible songs, but she's also like the best interpretive singer around. Like the way she interprets songs, she totally so there's a million ways to do it, I guess, but I've just never had the burn in me to just take at songwriting. It's just I think I just come from that traditional background, and I feel very privileged, and there's a lot to do, in that role. Like there's a lot of stuff to kind of learn, and there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to it's so vast, like, that you could spend your whole life. And I look at people that I know that are traditional singers, people like Ailish Kennedy, and a lot of them, most of them from West Kerry, and it's a life's work really to just delve in, and you're still only kind of covering a small bit of it.
If you write a song, you know how you want it to go, so half of the learning is done, because the melody's in your head. Like I find sometimes I'm like going to bed and I'm about to fall asleep, and an idea comes into my head, and I'm like, oh, I need to go to sleep, and I'm thinking, but that melody won't be there in the morning. Yeah. So I think this inbuilt melody, if you're going to be the singer of that song, it's already there, so you have less work to do. But if you have to interpret somebody else's song, you have to do more work and more preparation, and you have to think about it a lot more. So it's a job in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a job in itself, and one that I really, really love. Like I love all that crack. It just keeps me up at night too,
With your own solo albums, Red Colour Sun, Hush, Gossamer, how do you feel they have changed over those like 10, 15 years? How do you feel that the sound has changed on them?
I think I've changed as a person. I think, some singers kind of come out of the traps, cooked, like evolved, and that's how they sound forever. And I just was never that person. And I think I've improved, and I think I've grown into my voice over 20 years probably. And I'm actually in a better place with my own singing now than I've ever been. I hope that continues, but I think I'm more present in it, and I give less fucks, to be honest, about all the stuff that goes along with it. And that's really serious. Like that's so liberating. Like I really, really don't care. About the industry. I'm just a bit jaded from all of that. So the just bringing it back to the singing is kind of, and I suppose in a way COVID has allowed that too in this year, to kind of really reevaluate stuff, all the driving and flying and pulling and dragging that everybody was doing. And now you're just like, okay, when I want to go back to this, like, I think I might do it a bit more on my own terms, care less about the structures that kind of surround it, like the agents and the this and the that, and what will they want, and what will audience want, and what makes a good gig, and blah blah blah, and just really follow the art and follow the voice, and just see where that kind of brings me.
You brought up a very interesting point there, because artists nowadays, and forever, they've always had to think of this, but you meet some assholes along the way, lots of them, and you meet some assholes in the business who have no talent. And the thing about it is, as you said, you get pretty jaded, And for some people they say, I'm going to avoid that, but maybe then you're not in the network and you're not meeting people and your career isn't going anywhere. How have you?
Yeah, damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Exactly, yeah.
kind of.
How have you
Yeah.
dealt with that over the years? Like, are you a bit dubious when you meet new people in the industry and kind of like, it'll take me a while to figure it out, or do you know straight away?
That's a very good question. I think probably a bit of both. Like I have, like there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, but that in such an unregulated industry, I don't know if you can even call it an industry in Ireland. I mean, like we don't have at the moment really, or even a record label, that's putting stuff out. There's Ruby Works and things, but like in terms of, people, that they do very little. They have very few artists, so I don't know if you can even really call it an industry, like, but I'm very cautious. I've had a lot of bullshit conversations with people over the years, but I think that the fact that I've kind of stuck it out this long, I have a network of people around me that I work with all the time. And I keep meeting very exciting and new people. Like recently, I met this gorgeous and amazing woman, Ciara O'Leary Fitzpatrick. She manages John Spillane, and she just released his album with him. She's his manager, and she just did the release of that album and just did such a fantastic job. She's vibrant and young and fresh and enthusiastic and bright, and she's just set up her own company. So you do meet people along the way, and I think in a lot of ways, the old music mogul dinosaurs that ran the agencies and ran the labels, like they're gone, like good riddance, and in their place is coming kind of a crop of people who do lots of things, and they can edit videos and they can do all these things. So there is like really exciting people around, and new people to meet. But yeah, you'd be cautious, like, wouldn't you? Because everybody's been burnt so many times.
I recently saw a guy on LinkedIn, and he was like an A&R guy, but freelance. And he was looking for songs for artists for Warner and Universals and different things. But he never really spoke about his deal, like what he wanted. So then one day I saw one of his posts and he was looking for demos, and he said, and my deal would be 10% of the whatever the deal was, and 10% of the publishing. And I was thinking, well, hold on a second now, because I know some people in Sony Music in Spain. I met a few people, and I was talking to them, and they said a lot of the deals now are 60-40 for the record company, okay, in favor of the record company. So you imagine if you're getting 40%, but then this A&R freelance guy wants 10% of the publishing, you're coming out with 20%. It's just ridiculous.
Of your own song. Bananas, isn't it?
Of your own song. It's just madness. So there are still the sharks out there, and there are the people saying, oh, I can introduce you to this person. But I think nowadays artists don't want to be introduced to these A&R or these labels, because the labels can't do that much for you. The only thing they're good at is marketing.
They can't. And before, yeah, they used to be able to like throw a cash. Like I've had advances, and I was signed to Sony at one point with Lumiere, and went over to Nashville and did an album over there and different things over the years. And there used to be a few quid, like where you'd go. But like I've done a Kickstarter, you can kind of do that now. You can get capital from other ways, and unless you're signing like with a label, who have a big profile and have maybe a cult following. There's a few of those around the place, and the services and the PR and the kudos and the attention that it brings is amazing.
It's difficult, but I suppose the thing is now that you have a lot of independent artists releasing independently, and hoping for the best, and not having a budget for marketing and all these other things. But Kickstarter and these are great things, but the worst part is that we, as artists, we have to try and get money to make the albums, but then it's very hard to make money from them unless you're touring.
Really, like that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? And the stream revenue is so shite, and yeah, it's hard. Like, I mean, God knows why we persevere and still do what we do, because it is hard. But I guess ultimately, I think from my perspective, I'm so institutionalized now to being my own boss, living the way that I live and saying what I say, and having such freedom to be a person in the world, I think is the greatest thing. And I don't know how I could ever not do that. Like, I don't know who the fuck would employ me, because I have no skills. And, so there's a bit of that, that you're like, there are definitely rewards. And I'm not saying that, we shouldn't be financially recompensed for all the work that we do. And it's absolutely scandalous. And I think people who have regular jobs are often quite shocked to hear how little we earn and to hear how little, I mean, Mary Coughlin was on the radio telling Ray Darcy there recently that she earns roughly 30 grand a year. And this is to a man who earns like 450 grand a year. And he was just like flabbergasted that, I mean, his car is, you know what I mean?
You have artists nowadays coming out, and they're saying, I saw recently there where Paul Weller said he had 3 million streams for one of his songs or one of his albums, and he got like 10 grand, which is a nice chunk of change for a lot of people. But for him, who's a huge artist, it's nothing. So the point is, you kind of have to think to yourself, well, hold on, if 3 million is only 10 grand, you'd have to get like billions and billions and billions to try and become a millionaire. So it's really difficult, I mean, for small artists to make money. And, nowadays, I think, I even, like, I was thinking to myself, if I ever try and release more music, I think I want to stay away from Spotify, because even though it's like you said, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But I think what artists are starting to realize, it's a waste of time, Spotify now. I know it gets your music out there, but there's no money to be made from it.
There's, like I was talking to somebody about that recently. I mean, as an idea, the thing about Spotify is legislatively, and it's a really hard word to say, it's actually an easy fix. Like, we need to legislate for people to be paid properly for their intellectual property and to stop, drip or funneling all this money back to the major record labels and etc. So the concept works. The concept of Spotify is a great concept. It's just that it doesn't pay people fairly. So, like, if that element of it was legislated for and addressed in each of the territories, and like, I mean, I just think, and we've learned this through the pandemic as well. Like, there's people who have thought about the arts as an industry now because we're all on the PEP. Who had never considered it before, who thought of us all along as kind of glorified hobby people, and sure, aren't they lucky to be doing what they do because they love it? True, yes, but the fact that is it fair? Also, no, it's not, and that's also true. So I think people, and even the government, like, I work with an organization called Fair Play, which is, it's gender equality in traditional and folk music. And we talk to Minister Catherine Martin a lot, and over and back with different political parties at the moment. So they're looking at things like bringing in basic universal income for artists. So I think there's finally a bit of a recognition that we are a workforce and that we do services and we work for our money. And I think that for a country that has celebrated its arts for such a long time and traded off it, that's a relatively new concept, like, for a lot of people.
It's shocking. It's really shocking that a country that has so many saints and scholars and artists is only now thinking about rewarding those artists for all the years of work they've done and for giving them the minimum, like what they deserve.
Yeah.
And that's really shocking, because it always goes back to the thing, wasn't it, that, it's not a real job. But at the same time, when you don't have it, and if we didn't have music and art and film through this COVID, we'd be fucked, all of us.
Absolutely. And people need to start joining the dots between the Netflix and the drama group and the, and all of that, like, joining all those dots. And I mean, I think particularly for artists, like, it's hard for all arts workers. But, like, for instance, recently I've been asked to do a couple of things that have come online from the live performance scheme, the government scheme. And people are asking that artists take a reduced fee for these schemes. And I'm wondering, like, are they asking sound engineers and light and camera people and those same questions? It's like, if you go up, like, no disrespect to Michael D, he's a great man, but if you're asked to go up and play in Áras Nuachtaráin, which I have done a couple of times, they pay you about 150 quid.
Yeah.
Like, you have it spent in diesel on the way up in the car, really, by the time you do, like. It's, and it's like, I can't eat the honor or privilege or feed my daughter.
No, it won't. Michael D's picture on the wall won't feed your child.
No, like, No, and it is great, and it is an honor. Like, but once is enough. Like,
But you mentioned there the Netflix, and this is what's crazy. People are prepared to pay 10, 12, 15 euros a month for Netflix to see all their movies, but they still want Spotify free. And I think, like, if you look at Apple's model, they pay more than Spotify and everything. But Apple just say, if you want to listen to music on our platform, you pay a subscription, right? Now, the problem is Spotify are just luring people in. It's like a bait, you know, give it to them free and then hope they subscribe. But what they're effectively doing by giving everything away free is killing the artist's work, and they're not honoring it. And like, well, there, you just said there you did the Kickstarter and people funded it. So people will pay if they value something. But if you give people something for nothing, they never value it.
they never value it. And I've had this issue loads. Like, I had it with a festival here in Ireland recently enough, and they were doing a music trail, and it's a really well known festival, and they were doing a music trail, and I got this email to say, will you come and bring the band and do the music trail? It was actually in Dingle. And they were saying, we can put you up in this venue. And they were mentioned one of the pubs, and the person that I was dealing with didn't know I was from Dingle. And I was like, well, that is very far from a venue. And I, but so we have no fee, is basically what they were saying to me. And I was just like, but the gigs are free. And I'm like, why are you doing a whole music festival of free gigs? How is anybody going to get paid, and who values it, and what value is put on it? Like, it's the devaluation of our work is, I mean, it's economically gruesome, but it's also kind of morally and spiritually, it's an assault as well.
Probably there were sponsors involved, so someone is getting paid.
Oh, someone is getting paid, and I would imagine the person sending me the email is getting paid for sure. And then, like, even when you look at the funding bodies like the Arts Council and different people like that, like, there's a kind of almost like a class disconnect there, when you have people who are on very reasonable salaries, um, in charge of the systems and mechanisms that give out money to artists who aren't, and how little they understand the real precariousness of the work, and what the funding, how you should be able to access the funding, and what the funding should be given for, and what artists need versus what the establishment thinks they need, or
Yes, yes, yes. And like, I've heard the argument from Spotify that they couldn't run the model if they had to pay artists more. But the thing is, if I make a cake for your cafe, you have to pay me, and no, you have to charge the people enough to pay me. And this is the thing: if Spotify can't pay the artist, they need to charge the customer more. But they're just saying, well, we're not prepared to do that because we lose customers. I mean, it's easy to have, 1 billion subscribers if it's free. It's very easy to do that. The question is, if you charge them 10 euros a month or whatever it is, then you see, will people go to you or Apple or Tidal or whatever? And I think that's what has to change. The legislation has to say to those kind of, big streaming services, well, listen, that's your problem whether you charge or not, but you have to pay the artists what they're worth.
Yeah, but you have to pay the artists. Yeah, it's the only way, isn't it?
It's the only way. So listen, I'm not going to keep you for too much longer, Pauline. I just want to ask you, just about, like, obviously collaborations. You've recently worked with John, an amazing album, and I mean, you sound amazing on it. John sounds amazing, and John was on my show a few weeks ago, and he played some of the songs, and they're fabulous. And he was talking me through some of the recording procedures you had and the processes. For you, when you're doing work with, artists, as you said, Sharon Shannon, I know you did a song with Belinda Carlisle 2007 and different stuff. How do you approach that? Do you come from a different place than when you're doing stuff solo?
Yep, definitely. I love singing harmonies. Harmony singing kind of just interests me. It's a process, and it's an activity that I really enjoy. So I think, like, it's a very it's session work. Like, can you come and sing harmonies and do backing vocals on this music of somebody that I don't really know, but I think I can add something to the music. I do a lot of that, and I'm it's work, and I'm indifferent towards it, and I enjoy the process, but I may never hear the music or listen to it again. But then if there's, like, kind of more collaborative stuff, like, I'm a huge John Spillane fan. I absolutely love his songwriting. We're great old pals, and that's like getting a door into somebody else's world and somebody's creativity where you just really enjoy it, but you've none of the responsibility for it. Like, that's a dream, really. And I love that. Like, that's
You
just
go in and get to have fun.
just go in and get to have fun, and watch them do their thing, and then do your thing, and try and augment it and enhance it as best you can. And that's a completely thoroughly enjoyable process, and I love that as much as putting my own stuff out there, possibly even more, actually. But you can't always doing that, but I do love that.
Yeah, I like one song, that Dearest Dear, with My Dearest Dear, with Lumiere, with Eilish Kennedy. That's a fabulous song. So when you did that with Lumiere, is that still going with Lumiere, or is it kind of just something that comes up every so often?
It is, in theory. Like, I had Kitty in 2016, my daughter, and I kind of didn't do a whole pile actually after that. I kind of took a couple of years off. I released a solo album when I was pregnant, and just before, actually, and then I did the tour just before it. And Eilish and I, it's fully our intention to get together and to do something again, and nothing is dissolved. Like, the website is still there and all of that, but then the baby happened, and then COVID happened, and so we will absolutely get around to doing it again in the future. I love that, and I love singing with her, and hanging with her, and going for glasses of white wine with her, and
Very nice. That's lovely. It's like a sisterhood, Yeah.
It really is, very much, yeah.
I want to talk in a minute about obviously working with the Whileaways and your neighbors around there. But before that, one thing that I was really interested in, and it was amazing sound, was I hope I pronounced this correct, the Motu Ilan, the Maori and the collaboration. Tell us a little about that.
It's something else, isn't it? That came up through Jerry Paul, who is a guitar player and musician, originally Irish, and then him and his family, when he was a small child, moved out to Wellington. So he's Kiwi Irish, and he lived over here. He was in Grada with Nicola Joyce, and I've gigged with him and played music with him. We're friends 20 years now, I suppose, at this point. And he'd moved back to New Zealand, and he was just always saying that Te Reo Maori, there's so many commonalities between Indigenous New Zealand and Ireland, in the sense that they're a colonized country. They have a minority language in their own country of origin. And so there's lots of commonalities, and even kind of culturally and socially, Maori people and Irish people are, like, as we discovered, are so close. Like, just the sense of humor and the crack and all of that, and also like the deep tentacles, I suppose, of mythology and mysticism and parables, and just all of that, that kind of element of things. There's a lot really that we have that's similar. So Jerry had envisaged this collaborative fusion thing, and so off we went over to New Zealand, and I think we've done 3 trips over there, and it does work amazingly well. And I think that's a particularly, I think the particular characters involved, as well as the 2 musics, um, they meld very well, and it was just the particular musicians in question as well.
Yes, and what I noticed was, listening to the music, was you hear your voice, and you hear the female voice, whatever, and then you hear the male voices coming in, and you're kind of like, are they like Irish voices? And then you hear the Maori voices, so it kind of evolves, like, step by step through the lyrics and everything. It really changes.
Yeah, it does. And like, it was interesting, like, to sing with the guys all speak Te Reo Maori, and like, what are they like? There's no S. There's, oh God, it's a while now since I did, but like, there's like consonant sounds that they don't have, that are like there's no S. Is it S? I think it is S.
When you have the lyrics or whatever, let's say if you're doing an Irish song, do they take the Irish words and translate them into Maori, or they sing the Irish ones?
Both, yeah. And then we'd learn some of theirs, and they learn some of ours. But very, very, it's more we sing each other's rather than translate. I mean, there's a bit of it goes on, But it's mostly shared out in the other way.
Wow, it's really interesting though. It's a really interesting project. And let's talk a bit about obviously working with the Whileaways and the whole Bird on a Wire and stuff. Obviously, and the Whileaways are a great band and some beautiful harmonies, and you singing with them, it works wonderfully together. So, how did that kind of collaboration come about?
I got asked by a friend of mine. They actually own the INEC in Killarney, the Irish National Entertainment Centre, and the Gleneagle Hotel. And we know them years. And Patrick O'Donoghue and his wife, Eileen, were married for 25 years. And Eileen and I had always discussed our love of Leonard Cohen, and we'd always be talking about this song and that song. And Patrick rang me and said, "Will I put a band together to celebrate, to sing, to gift her as a surprise, and to do an hour of Leonard Cohen songs?" So I said, "Jesus, no bother." So no better people to do all the harmonies and then we got all the local musicians, Dave Clancy and Will Merrigan, and we just spent a month back in our house here in Headford just putting together a Leonard Cohen set. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And the phone just started ringing and more people wanted it and people heard about it, and then people came to the gigs, and then it's just a kind of a runaway success, really. It's a funny thing, it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, and we're just kind of tagging along behind.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really good, and some amazing voices and great musicians, all Dave Clancy and all those, Will Merrigan's brilliant. So I think obviously when the touring does come back, you'll have great success with that, and people will want to hear more, won't they?
They will, and I think we're not trying to float a new idea or anything. I mean, these are age-old, tested, enduring songs that people love to listen to. So I think that it's an easy sell in that sense as well when we do come back.
What's your favorite song to do, Leonard Cohen song?
What's my favorite song to do? I have a few for different. Famous Blue Raincoat, I think, probably.
Yeah, he was an amazing artist. I mean, it's nice, as well, obviously, as you said, for different generations, every 5-10 years, for people to come along and look back and say, "Oh, look at that music was amazing," and let's pay it its due diligence. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So listen, Pauline, I want to thank you very much, and the last thing I want to ask you really is, what are you hoping to achieve in the next? I won't say year. I'll say year or two, because we don't know, obviously. Yeah. What's your plans like? Are you going to work on another? Well, you're working on this album at the moment. When do you hope to release that one?
I hope to release that in kind of November time. So that's what I hope. And I hope to have a successful run. And I hope to generate some discussion and some introspection around the agency of women in traditional song, and to have feminist conversations across a broad spectrum of mediums. And I hope that it's a talking point.
And that's great. And it's something in the future I'd love to have yourself and some other people on the podcast to talk about those things together. It'd be amazing, because I've had some people on with similar kind of ideas and everything. So it would be really nice to just converge those ideas and show people what way things are moving now.
That would be great, and thank you for that invitation and opportunity. I accept.
Brilliant. So listen, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You taking the time to talk to us. You've been on my radar for a while, so I've been thinking, okay, I have to get Pauline on the show.
Oh, great. And thanks so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed the chat, actually. It's been really, really enjoyable.
Brilliant. That's really good. And look, best of luck with everything in the future, and best of luck finishing your new album. And we'll plug it when it comes out. Just drop us a line and we'll give it a blast, and we'll show people what it's about.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
Maybe you'll come on again sometime and sing for us in the future. But
best
of luck with everything, and thanks so much, and take care. So Pauline Scanlon, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. Bye.
Okay, thank you very much, Pauline. That was a really interesting conversation, and we wish you the best in the future. And thank you for coming on the show and giving us your opinion on how everything is in the Irish music industry and your experience of the music industry in general. So thank you once again. Okay, next week's guest is Kieran O'Reilly. Kieran O'Reilly is an actor, musician and producer. Kieran is a real-life police detective who worked for many years as an undercover drugs operative. He is known for his role in the Emmy Award-winning television series Vikings as Whitehair. Kieran arrived onto the acting scene in 2013 with a critically acclaimed performance in Ireland's television crime drama Love Hate as Detective Garda Kieran Madden, and in 2016 was nominated for the Discovery Award at the Dublin International Film Festival. He is also the singer-songwriter of the Irish alternative band Hail the Ghost. Okay, so we look forward to that chat with Kieran, and we hope you join us, and thank you very much for listening to today's episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the future, guys. So look after yourself, take care of everyone you love, and see you next time. Take care.